Okay. Hey, Kerri, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today. And I want to give our listeners the opportunity to jump into your journey right away because you are definitely a fire starter and you are and you are in the fire currently.
Yeah.
So I would love just really to start out at the beginning of your journey. And I know it was about 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Can you share about that moment when you first heard God's calling in your life to kind of turn and take that path less chosen?
Yeah. I think this happens for a lot of people, but trauma is sometimes a catalyst for great change. Even when you look at like the weather and stuff, a lot of that happens because of a storm or so for
Mhm.
me, it was divorce. And I had never allowed myself the space to think I would ever be divorced. I didn't know how to be divorced. I was then a single mom. And I had this moment and I'm so grateful. And I thank God regularly for this because I don't know where it came from. I just know I had this moment where I said, okay, God, I've made a mess of this. And I was already a Christian. It wasn't about knowing him or being a Christian, but it was the moment of surrender. And I think scripture talks about working out our salvation with fear and trembling. That was a fear and trembling moment where I said, my control of this has led nowhere fast. And so my life is yours. Thankfully, he is very kind and he didn't demand that I change everything the moment my divorce was over because that would be, I think, kind of cruel. Maybe he would do that to someone, but he allowed the dust to settle. And he used that time, it was about a year. My divorce was in 2017. It was about a year of him healing my heart. My word for the year was salve. He was really reaching deep places of hurt and reconnecting to me as my father and even as my husband in that deficit, so that I could trust him for the things that he was going to ask of me. And it started with a change in my job. And I had been in a corporate role for about 12 years. I loved corporate life. I loved the energy of it. I loved being part of something much bigger than me. And I got to be the expert of my respective thing. I got to lead my team and I got to go home at the end of the day. I had
Right.
killer paycheck, benefits, all the things. But he started planting this seed that I was going to be leaving my job. And once the grace has been lifted from a thing, you can feel that shift palpably if you're really connected to the Lord. You feel it in your bones. But again, his kindness was such that he was sort of baby stepping me through it. So it was a good 6 months probably before. So every day I'd say, it's today the day, it's today the day, it's today the day. No, it wasn't. And then it was. Today was the day. And I even asked him, please prepare my boss, who I loved. I loved my work. I said, prepare her that this is coming because she was also a Christian. And when I walked in and gave notice that day, she said, I didn't even think you were going to be back because I was on medical leave when God said it was finally time to pull the trigger. So it was really a slow, kind process for me, but that was the first big step.
What were There had to be so many challenges. I mean, especially if you were on medical leave, newly divorced ish. I mean, a
Yeah.
year, but still.
Yeah.
So, what were the first challenges that you experienced as you stepped out of safety, security, what's expected, what our culture
Right.
praises?
Right.
What were those
Um,
challenges?
yeah. The first one was obviously a sense of safety because I was walking away from medical benefits, like little
Mhm.
stuff like this, because I'd never had an entrepreneurial spirit. So I'd never considered what life away from a big corporate job would even look like. So just the logistics of that was a lot for me because I'm a planner 5, 10, 20 years. So logistically, it was a big shift. I thankfully had a lot of people around me who were very encouraging of this. I did not have anyone say, this is a terrible idea. Um, I wasn't asking everybody what they thought, but sometimes people will offer up their thoughts anyway. And this is a really big part of it for me. My son is adopted from foster care, so if I could really put into perspective the risk that I was taking, leaving a job. So I have plenty of money in the bank. I had just been saving like a crazy person. So I have all this money in the bank. Like that's not a huge risk, right? I had a safety net. My son, his start to life was a very hard one. Like we're talking about life and death. So that helped me also keep perspective around what level of risk really was. And I also, Hillary, wanted him to see people making big moves of faith. I don't want him to walk around afraid of doing things that God asks us to do. And I wanted him to see that God would take care of us, and he did. But the challenge was still there. I still had to trust that he would. But the big ones were just a sense of safety around money and security.
Yeah.
And then as I stepped into the next season, which was the foster care piece and offering assistance to a nonprofit for no pay, business assistance, feeling like I wasn't at all equipped for it. I'd never done work in nonprofit world, so I feel like a total phony. I'm like, who do you think you are? I would be sitting in my office and I was like, you didn't train for this. You didn't come up it was a really small organization, but still, I'm like overnight. And I just came to her. I was like, hey, I'm leaving my job. I'm going to jump on board. And she was like, great. You're the new COO. And I was like, what? That can't be right. And I said, I don't want you to call me COO. Like the expectations around that are going to be too big. Well, no, it wasn't. We were able to craft it and make it what we needed it to be. And the things God did because of my obedience, the things he did for them, he was waiting on me and my stepping into that role to push them into a completely different space. But the challenge in the moment I was sitting in the office is, who do you think you are? This is insane.
I have struggled with that myself, that imposter syndrome. And I love, okay, so he turns you away from corporate, and he turns your heart is being pulled towards foster care, helping the foster system, really just your heart for those children and boys specifically, because of your son's experience.
Yes.
But I'm noticing that there wasn't like this roadmap, this laid out plan where he's like, this is how you go. This is where you go. X marks the spot. It was just, what's the next step? And you find yourself in that office. And then even then you're like, I don't even have the skills for this, but I'm here.
Yes. Yes. The only things I knew to do, so because I knew the foster care thing didn't come from me, we were put in the position of adopting from foster care, not because I always had a burden to help foster kids. I look back now and God was preparing me, even as a little girl. I had a burden, but I didn't know what it was. That all was him. And so a burden like that or wanting to reach out, I knew was him. So that gave me some level of confidence that this was coming from him because it was so random. Yes. And I'm put in this position. It was so random. Like it only could have been him. And so the things I knew to do were follow the breadcrumbs. So this agency had a connection to the church I was going to. And a friend said, hey, I went to an informational session on foster care with this group. Maybe you want to call them. And I started doing that before I left my job. Started connecting with them and helping them with just some general planning. So following breadcrumbs and just randomly calling people that were in the field that I felt like I was going into. But I wasn't trying to be something I wasn't. I said, this is what I'm good at. This is what I can offer you. How can I help you and how could you use those skills? And every time they had a desperate need, they were already doing the other stuff. They didn't need me to come in and be like frontline foster care, whatever. They needed someone to help them put a strategic business plan together and help them get a new website up and help build programs and write job descriptions and all these things that they hadn't had time to do. So it was, and I also really dove deeply into understanding more who God had created me to be. So I took a Finding My Identity seminar at church, which really helped make very black and white some of what he had been laying out, because it was a really good blend of like secular kind of not spiritual stuff and spiritual stuff, and putting it all together. And the pieces started to connect because I was asking myself questions I had never asked.
Mm.
So doing research on that, following breadcrumbs and having conversations, and then offering what I already knew my strengths were. Instead of trying to be all things to all people, I knew that just wouldn't work.
How do you discern God's voice in those moments,
Mm-hmm.
and then your own thoughts or
Right.
desires, or I mean, I know that's something that I struggle with. So how
Yeah,
have you?
everyone does. This was another thing that I did, Hillary. I'm a researcher, so when I'm diving into my identity, I'm also diving into how do I hear the voice of God? There are different ways that we are built to hear Him. So, do you see? Do you hear? Do you feel? Do you know? What's your inclination? What does that look like? And how do you refine it and perfect it and get better? Because that's a muscle you have to flex and tear and get wrong. And I do think there's some testing that happens in that, so that we stay humble and we really keep coming back to God,
Mhm.
to to refine it. I think it's really important to have other people around you that are prophetically minded and gifted and vet some of what you're hearing, to ask some questions and poke some holes in it. But it first starts with, if it's not aligned with the Word of God, throw it away. It's not for you. Um,
Right.
it I also have found if it's pervasive and it won't go away, and it brings me peace, not because it's something I want to hear and something I want to do, but it's not like a sense of doom. It's not,
Right.
if you don't do this, your son's going to die or whatever. But it may be something like, oh no, I don't, like me leaving my job. It was like, oh no, but I just knew. And it kept coming. And I would intermittently get words from other people too, that you're like, someone came up to me in that season and said, it was a song from a movie that I like to move it. They're like, I feel like this song's for you. And just like really cool little stuff like that. And that has continued for forever. But he also speaks to me a lot. And this is something that's happened a lot more recently. He speaks to me a lot through numbers because I love them. So aside from learning how you hear the voice of the God, learn what clues he uses consistently in your life. And for me, it is numbers. So I could see when he was ordering things, I would look at the clock and it would say 11, and my necklace is 11:11, but it would say 11:11, or consistently I would see a scripture that reaffirms something over and over. So to me, he is a God of order. And so there usually will be consistency. There will always
Yes.
be consistency with the word, always. There will be consistency. There will be confirmation. And it will be somewhat peaceful and orderly. It won't be chaotic.
I love that. That is so true. And numbers are huge. I mean, he is a God of numbers, and numbers have so much meaning in the Bible. And he does speak to us in different ways. I have learned that myself, and it is a muscle you have to flex. And you only get the opportunity when you take this journey, when you do step out towards him and say, I'm surrendering and I'm giving you control and I'm going to
Mhm.
operate in obedience. So since that time, that was 5 years ago, I know, because I know your journey, it has not been linear, and there has been ample opportunity to grow your intimacy and dependence on him. So I want us to touch on that, because I think as women, we can have this. And for me, happy where I was, but I was discontent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew he was pulling and tugging on
Yes.
my heart, and I kept like slapping it away and just being like,
Right.
just let me be over here, because this is what life on earth looks like.
Right.
But that discontent was there. And so turning towards it, he is turning you towards something, but he doesn't give you that roadmap. And it's
Mhm.
not beautiful and perfect and simple. And so I
Mhm.
guess what I'm saying is, I want to go there. I want to get into the complicatedness of it, because it won't be a straight line. And success, even though he may have given you a vision of your future and what he's calling you to, you don't get there as soon as you think.
Right.
So kind of take us through the valleys and the mountains
Yeah.
journey.
Well, I was always looking for something with longevity. That's my nature. Like, I'm a stayer. That was part of the struggle in my marriage. I just kind of camped out, and I wasn't comfortable, but I had just decided we weren't going to get divorced. Therefore, I didn't have the sense of urgency maybe I should have around some of the things that were happening. And so when he moves me from a job of 12 years, I'm like, well, he's obviously going to take me somewhere else for a decade, because that's what a responsible person does. So,
Right.
great, you're taking me to this nonprofit. We're going to get these programs going, and then they're going to be able to pay me. And obviously, I won't make the salary I did before, but all will be well. No, a year comes and goes, and they still can't pay me. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously, I have to make some decisions. And then he says, and he had already started preparing me for this, it's time to sell your house. This was a hard one for me because, number one, I had decided we weren't leaving our home because I wanted my son to have some stability and some connection to what he had before. We had a tremendous support system with our neighbors. And I love decorating, and I had touched every square inch of that home. So it was love for me. That house represented God's love for me. So the idea of letting it go was like not cool. But I did it. And he again kind of baby stepped me through it every day, turning into the neighborhood. Are we leaving? No, 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 until he said yes. And then when he said yes, called that day, was on the market in a couple weeks, sold in a week, like we were gone. And it began this, the Ecclesiastes 3 idea of seasonality around things is so true. And that is a biblical principle of sowing, tending, and reaping. Like we are not supposed to be harvesting or always sowing, always harvesting, always tending. There is movement, always movement. You're tearing things up so that you can grow new. So there was a season why I was at that nonprofit. There was a season why I was in my house, and he did let me stay, but he used the equity from that house. I'm still reaping the benefits of that, still reaping the benefits. And it was excruciating. That was one of the worst days ever. It was terrible. And then he moved me into short season where I immediately was ready to go buy another home. He said, no, he moved me in with a friend. So I'm renting. I'm not in my house. It's out of my son's school district. I'm having to drive him to and from. So I'm certain we're going to get busted and he's going to get kicked out of school. Like, it's just a bunch of little things. But then when he said it's time to move cities, because I wasn't connected to a job or a house, I was able to just pack up and go. And that season ended up being a time of not having traditional work either. So the challenge is always the presupposition of what timing looks like. And you and I were just talking about this. He's not bound by space and time. So once we subscribe to his way, we are now operating outside of space and time, not disorder and not chaos. Right. He ordered all those things very clearly. In the middle of it, it felt like complete chaos. So me putting a definition of what order is, me putting a definition of what success is, even safety, like that season, that ended up being COVID when my son I was driving him back and forth to school. So it ended up being such a blessing to him because he's very anti-change. We were at home, so he wasn't at school with his friends anyway. So it was like, oh, and we were by this beautiful park, so we were able to walk every day. And it's, I think if we can connect to the heart of the Father, who, number one, knows us intimately, created us, and he knows what brings us peace and joy, and trust that he's not going to he's not out to destroy us. And that's been the lie that I've had to overcome too, is that the life of faith is also the life of a martyr in a way, that there's going to be some destruction on the other side of it. So when you do make these big moves and you're looking for some sort of black and white representation of what success and stability looks like, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. But you can know that he is here for your good and not your harm. And again, it comes back to those community of people around you, because sometimes you're so inside yourself and you're so in the middle of it, you can't even see what he's ordering. They can remind you. And I highly suggest journaling too, if you don't, because that's been a touch point for me to go back and say, mind blowing ways that he has said things were coming, that things he set into motion, where I can go back and see all the ways he was putting the pieces together.
Yes. Have there been times in your journey where you doubted your decisions? How do you work through that?
Yeah. 2022 was the worst, second to my divorce, the worst year of my life, and full of doubt and full of heartache and desperation, desperately trying to understand what happened. I made a huge leap. And this was another one where God had moved us to a new town. And it became pretty clear once I got there why we were there. And that was, I ended up donating a kidney to someone. So the odds of us ending up there at the same time, the odds of me being a match, the transplant happened on 11/11. Like, you guys, come on. You can't write this stuff. Well, it was also someone I ended up dating. I was actually dating him before it happened. The transplant happened. The relationship fell apart, and God also told me it was time to move again. So that door is like completely closed. And I, again, was attributing his affection to this like epic love story that I felt like he was writing. And that doesn't mean in the process I didn't keep asking God, is this a good idea? Like, should we really be dating and going through this? And I felt like it was this big, it was a miracle. It's going to be a miracle, like on every level. And so when all that ended and came crashing down, I felt so betrayed by my father. My hope and faith and love and everything was so wrapped up in what I felt like God was doing. To have that rug pulled out from under me and the wind knocked out of me, to feel like I have physical scars on my body, and that was the one thing I kept saying, please don't leave me with scars and the broken heart. Like, that would be the worst outcome. I was again, and I don't have answers to all of it. I know what came out of the same as my divorce, when I sat down and was like, okay, God, this is a disaster. You know, what do you want to do with this? I did that at the end of last year, and I said, okay, I'm not subscribing to this idea of chaos and me just not understanding what happened. I'm going to believe defiantly that something better is coming, whatever that looks like. And I can't go on if that's not true. God, I will not live a life where I don't think you do have something better. And he had given me the word resurrection for 2022. And I was so angry at God, I refused to even ask for the word for 2023. But the word he gave me was better anyway. And the scripture for resurrection was John 11:11. And that's the story of Lazarus, where he says he's not dead, he's only sleeping. So to me, I thought that was resurrection of promises and broken dreams and all that. It wasn't. It was at the end of last year, he took me through this deep, deep, hard healing process where he resurrected parts of me from when I was a little girl that would never have come up had I not had my heart broken. And in his kindness, he still said, and your word for 2023 is better, which is John 11:12, the next verse. And if he's only sleeping, he'll get better.
Mm.
Here I am at the end of 2023. Don't know what better means, but there's a couple months left. So I wish I had, that's my most recent example of kind of disappointment and confusion. And it was a big one that really, I thought it was going to take me out. I really thought it was going to take me out. But there's this new level of just defiance in me.
Mm.
It's not pretty. It looks very much like David, where I'm screaming and then also praising God at the same time. And I think sometimes that's what faith is. It's just, nope, that's not what you said. I don't understand this. I don't know why this looks this way. And being that defiant person for your friends too. They're like, no, that's not true. What you're
Yeah.
speaking is not true. This is what's true. And the thing that always keeps me going is, and this is not from a place of fear, it's just a sense of knowing that I will stand in front of him when this earth doesn't exist anymore, and I will give an account of what I did with what he gave me.
Yes.
And there's going to be deep grief in some of that. I think we're going to have an understanding of some of what we missed. And so I'm like, I can't stay stuck in this place of anger and brokenness and miss out on something else. Not because I'm afraid of displeasing him, but because that's what he made me for. And I know when I'm connected to that work, I am at my best and happiest and feel, oh my gosh, I'm like, okay, I'm like really my dad's daughter. Like he really did put this in me and he really did set this whole thing up and only he could have done it.
I love that. And I feel like when we start our journey, our focus is so much on the desires he's put in our hearts and what he's turning us towards. And we're like, yes, he's promising this. And oh my God, my heart desires this so much. And I'm so excited that gets you going. But on the flip side of that coin is his love for us. And he's like, oh, yes. But what I'm excited about is the process I will take you through.
Yes.
I love you too much to leave you the way you are. I think about just the neighborhood you were around when you had to sell your house, the support you had, the financial security, even a romantic love. I see an opportunity of a stripping away to create full dependence on him.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not easy, and it would almost seem cruel, but your faith, you know, it is because he is a good father.
Yep.
And I just feel watching you and knowing you in your journey, he has called you to so much that he needs that y'all's relationship so strong so that you can stand in what he's fully called you into.
Yeah.
What advice would you give someone who feels that calling, but they're afraid to take the next step?
I would say there's a couple of safe things that you can do, like I did, and that's just start having conversations with people in those fields. I had a season where I started a decorating business. That's still kind of confusing, but I was looking for people to talk me out of it, honestly. So I was like, oh, I'm going to find out that they all went to school and had all these licenses and things. And all the people God put in my way were self-taught, like moms who went and started these killer businesses. So every one of them said, you can do this. Like, you can do this. And so that's what I started doing. And really sitting down and diving in and doing an honest evaluation of yourself. And there are tools out there to help you write like your personal mission statement, take spiritual gifting tests, take Enneagram tests, do the test to figure out how you hear the voice of God. Like there's some practical work you can do before you actually step out and start like building a plan and all that. But that's easy stuff to do. That's really not high risk other than, and there'll be some people who won't want to talk to you. That's okay. Like they don't know you. That's fine.
Yeah.
And there were lots of people that didn't return my call and some of them just didn't have time to talk to me. But they weren't the ones God wanted me to talk to. So very
Right.
practical stuff you can do early on.
I love that. I think even in my journey, I I felt that call to turn towards something, but there's nothing to turn towards. Like he just changed my heart and what I
Yeah.
desired, and it was no longer teaching in the classroom. And all I heard him say, I'm like, okay, so what am I? Where am I going? What am I doing? And I just heard him say, lean in and hear me. And so, and I see more visions in my mind.
Yeah.
It was quiet time, being in his word. Like it was, you
Yeah.
need to establish a routine of time
Yes.
with me.
Yeah.
I spent 7 years in just that season.
Wow.
7 years of building the muscle of seeking him in his
Yeah.
word and knowing him and flexing that muscle. If somebody would have told me at the end of like, it's going to take 7 years and you're just going to be right here, I would have been like, what?
You wouldn't do it.
No, which I think is a big reason why he doesn't give us
Intentional.
the roadmap. Yeah, he's like, just lean in. This is your next right step. Okay.
But even
And
that number 7 is meaningful. You can look back now and say,
mhm.
that was totally ordered. He totally wanted me to have that. And there are moments where it's an Abraham where it's like, go to the land I will show you. You literally are packing up and moving and you don't know why. But usually it's more like your journey. And I do want to go back and say, time with him and time in the word is non-negotiable. And that has to happen every day, every single day. And it is sitting still in his presence too.
Mhm.
It's not just doing devotionals and praying to him. It is very much a stop and ask what's on his heart and what he has for you that day. And worship is a huge part of it too. That tone of praise instead of, okay, what work are we doing? You know, he so desires that friendship and relationship as well. That has to happen before anything else.
That is so good. That wisdom right there. I hope whoever's listening like rewinds like a full 2 minutes and just hears that in part because you may have that dream and that vision in front of you and go, okay, let's go be about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he is going to slow you down
Mm-hmm.
until you are about him.
Right.
That is so good.
He cares far more about his relationship with you than he does the tasks he's asking of you. He cares about the work because it is good for you and it will be good for someone else. But his first priority is your heart. So
Yeah.
that's the thing you're going to commit to him first.
Yeah, it is a journey. I thought I was starting on a journey where I was just going to be obedient and go do what he asked me to do. And he's like, oh, friend, you don't even understand the full capacity of
No.
what is about to happen between us. But I think you bring up just something that is imperative. We will give an answer and we will have that moment in front of him
Yep.
where he takes a look at our life and we have to look at what was I pursuing? Was it my own comfort
Right.
or was it your will?
That's right.
And I mean, we all have that moment. So
You will. You
I
will.
just want to say thank you so much for taking the opportunity to share your wisdom with us. I know there is a woman folding laundry somewhere or, going through her daughter's closet and changing out seasonal clothing, and she's listening to this. And I think what you shared here today is encouragement that the journey is so worthy and so meaningful and filled with purpose. But also you served her well because she knows it is not going to be easy
Oh,
or linear and you will not arrive right away. I don't know. Maybe she will. Maybe some people arrive sooner. But for both
yeah.
of us, it's
Yeah.
been 5 years and we're in it. We are
Yes.
just in the middle of it.
Yes. Yes.
So,
And that will continue. And I want to say to that woman and anyone else, you have not missed it. You are not so far gone that you can't do this. You are not too broken.
mm-hmm.
It can all happen at once. Life is a journey of healing because life is still happening. So you can heal, and that doesn't mean he won't do like he did with Hillary, where you're down for 7 years and he's working on something. But I'm now still walking. Last weekend, huge revelation about things I need to deal with, but I'm still doing work alongside it. So it's an and process. It's not an either or. You don't have to be in a certain spot to start. He cares much about how you start. In fact, he celebrates it. in a huge way. So celebrate the small thing that you're doing just to start. Don't overwhelm yourself with standing in front of him. Just know that that's the thing that breaks my heart more than anything is feeling like I missed that. And you haven't. If you're breathing, you haven't missed it. You can do it.
It's so good. That is so good. Thank you, friend. I
Mm-hmm.
tell you, you served someone very well today. And I guarantee you there are going to be women who are going to go forward and take that next step even tomorrow, or maybe even right now. They're like, I'm putting down the
Yes.
laundry. I'm going to go get my journal right now.
Good.
Oh, it's so good. So good. Well,